First, the USDA's Justice for All non-discriminatory statement, which simply states that all persons must be treated equally without regard to their race, color, national origin, sex, religious creed, disability, age, political beliefs, or reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activity, and that our institution provides an inclusive space for all. For more information on the And Justice for All statement, please visit the USDA's website.
Hi everybody, welcome to this edition of the Family Foodie where we talk about storing fruits and vegetables. My name is Maddie. I am a nutrition educator for the Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Mercer County, the Department of Family and Community Health Sciences, and SNAP Ed. I am so happy that you could tune in with us today, and I'm looking forward to talking more about fruits and vegetables. So last week, you may have tuned in when my colleague Ella discussed how to best store, cook, and freeze winter squash. She had several different types of winter squash. She cut one up for us. She also baked one, and she also froze one. It's a great lesson. If you didn't get a chance to tune in, I do encourage you to follow us, like us, interact with that post from last week on our Facebook page. Moving forward, today we're going to continue talking about storing fruits and vegetables. So specifically, we're going to talk about today best practices with different types of fruits and vegetables. So let's get into it. So the first kind of group of fruits and vegetables that we're going to talk about are these right here. So I have a melon, I have a tomato, and I have an apple. These types of fruits and vegetables, specifically also if this melon was not already pre-cut, these are the kinds of fruits and vegetables that you really want to store on your counter in a nice cool, dry space at room temperature until they ripen to a point where you think they're the best to eat. The same with like peaches or pears. So if you, for instance, were to get a tomato from your garden or from the grocery store or the farmer's market and it maybe needed a little more time on the counter, let it sit on the counter for a few days. Once it reaches a ripeness that you think is nice, you can, or you think might be the peakness of flavor, you can put it in your refrigerator. The same goes for melons. Again, this is a cut melon, so that's a little bit of a different situation. But if this melon were uncut, you'd want to let it ripen on your counter, and then you would stick it in your refrigerator once it got to a point where you were interested in eating it. However, now that this is cut, this is always best to store in the refrigerator. Okay, so that's our first group. We have, these items that will be stored on the counter until they're a little more ripe, and then you can put them in your refrigerator. Let's move on to the items that should go right into the refrigerator. So I have here in front of me, I have beetroot, I have carrots, I have some fresh greens, I have cauliflower, and I have peppers. So with these items, they really stay at the best freshness and the best way that you can move them on to eating them when they're stored in the refrigerator. For instance, I feel like fresh greens are kind of one of those ones that we think of as being best stored in the refrigerator. But we leave them out too long, they begin to wilt, they begin to get brown, they might even grow some mold or go bad to the point where we can't eat them. So fresh greens are really important to store in the refrigerator, either in a bag or maybe in an airtight container in your cooler drawer for vegetables. The same goes with cauliflower. This is something that you definitely want to keep in the refrigerator along with broccoli and other brassicas. And then peppers. So peppers are another great example of something you really want to store in the refrigerator. Depending on the item, you want to keep an eye on it, but sometimes up to 14 days, depending on the temperature of your refrigerator, how old the actual particular vegetable is, and things like that, and the level of moisture. Now, the root vegetables that we have here, sometimes these are a little bit tricky because root vegetables do have like a thicker skin, they're a little harder. They might seem as though that they could be on the counter or something that's left out, but really root vegetables like these, like this beetroot and this carrot, it's really important to keep them in the refrigerator at a good temperature so that they don't go bad, even though they do have that tougher skin. Okay. So we've talked about things that can ripen on the counter and then go into the refrigerator. We've talked about things that should go right into the refrigerator for 7 to 14 days, depending on how old the vegetable is and what it looks like over time. Now let's talk about things that we can keep out on the counter or in a cool, dry space in a cabinet. So these are things that have a very long shelf life for fresh fruits and vegetables, but don't necessarily need to go into the refrigerator. So these are really fun items to know about. All right, so we have here, which is what Ella talked about last week, we have an acorn squash. Okay, so this is a winter squash, just like a butternut squash or a spaghetti squash. These things have great, nice, thick, tough skin, and they can stay on your counter for sometimes up to 1 to 3 months. Okay, so you can stick them in the refrigerator if you're worried about maybe them growing mold or getting a soft spot, but these can stay on the counter for a very long time, which is a great option if you're storing fruits and vegetables and you want to kind of prolong the harvest that you have from your winter squash. Other items that can stay on your counter in a cool, dry place for a really long time are garlic. Okay, so garlic, typically when you buy it at the grocery store, it's going to be cured, meaning it's going to last. It's going to have a very long shelf life, and if you keep it on your counter in a cool, dry place, this can last also up to 1 to 3 months. Same with onions. Onions and garlic are really, those really flavor-packed kind of staples to most meals. And they can stay fresh for a very long time, also on the counter. So another great item to remember. Shelf life is super long. Keep them in a cool, dry place. The same goes for regular potatoes and sweet potatoes. So these two items, again, just like the other shelf items, these don't need to go in the refrigerator. They can stay in a maybe a bag or a box in one of your cabinets. Definitely like a cooler, darker place is helpful, and they can last also for up to 1 to 3 months. Now, we talked briefly about all these different fruits and vegetables, where they should be stored, how they should be stored for best freshness. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to these vegetables. For instance, you always want to make sure that you're checking your fruits and vegetables for mold or brown spots, or maybe if they smell a little funny, or discoloration, because food safety is very important. So, again, there are exceptions to the rule, and you want to make sure you're paying attention to the signs on fruits and vegetables, especially fresh fruits and vegetables, if they have started to go bad. And just when in doubt, throw it out. That's really the best rule. But when stored properly, they can have a really great long shelf life, and that can really help increase your fruit and vegetable consumption over time. Okay, so now that we've talked about these fruits and vegetables, we talked about how they're stored, let's talk briefly about also blanching. Last week, Ella talked about freezing and cooking winter squash. Now, another option to do with fresh fruits and vegetables before you freeze them is something called blanching. For those of you who haven't heard of blanching, it's essentially just this process of quickly kind of parboiling or partially boiling a certain particular fresh fruit or vegetable, and then quickly freezing it so it only cooks partially, and then throwing it in a bag or a container and freezing it. Now, blanching might seem like this step that takes a lot of time, that isn't really worth it, and for some people it's not. Some people it's really, there's not a good reason to blanch, and that's totally fine. However, blanching is really great because it helps preserve the texture, flavor, and color of certain fruits and vegetables that we want to freeze and save for later. So a great example of blanching that I like, or a vegetable that's great to blanch that I like to use, is green beans. Okay, green beans, I love green beans. They're literally my favorite vegetable, and that's a bold statement, but they literally are my favorite vegetable. And I always grow a lot of them over the summer. And so in order to eat them later on in the year when they're no longer growing, is I will blanch them to preserve the texture and the flavor and the color, and then I will freeze them in my freezer. So I'm gonna give you a quick demonstration in blanching. And right over here, I have my colander full of washed green beans. I have my pot of boiling water. I will turn that off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my green beans in my boiling water. It's not too hot. Okay. Place some in there. All right. I'm going to set my timer for 30 seconds. Okay, and while I'm setting my timer for 30 seconds, I'm just gonna label the bag that I'm eventually going to put my green beans in, okay? So I labeled, they're in there, they're boiling, so I'm gonna put the date, and today's date is October 5th? October 5th, wow, almost forgot today's date. Actually, it's the 6th. we're gonna roll with it, October 6th, 2020, and then I'm going to put green beans. And in parentheses, I'm gonna put blanched, just so I know I didn't just freeze them, they're blanched. Okay, so we are at our 30-second mark, so I'm gonna quickly take, and can you see me here? Maybe we can shift over a little bit. How about now? All right, so I have my boiling water. I'm going to pull my green beans out. I'm going to put them in this ice bath. So this ice bath is literally just a few ice cubes and water. So I made some ice water, and that helps the green beans immediately stop cooking. Okay, so they've stopped cooking, so they're only partially cooked. And again, this is not to cook them. This is just to partially, partially cook them, and then also preserve the flavor and the texture and the color of them. So once those are nice and cooled, I'm gonna open up my bag here. I'm gonna pull my green beans out. I'm using a slotted spoon so that I don't get all the excess water. And I'll just put them right in my bag. It's all labeled. And so once I have my green beans ready, I will seal this up and I will put them in the freezer to freeze over time. And there are so many different types of fruits and vegetables that you can do this with, or you can just, straight up freeze, or maybe cook fully and freeze. And so now that I demonstrated blanching, I just want to encourage you to go onto our Facebook page, because I know I talked about green beans, but there are so many other items that you can blanch or cook and freeze. And so we have information on our Facebook page about all those different items. We also have more information about the proper way to store certain fruits and vegetables. So I really encourage you to check out our Facebook page and that further information on the storing fruits and vegetables lesson. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you could come. Thanks for coming to this edition of the Family Foodie, and we hope to see you next week. Actually, Thursday. We hope to see you on Thursday. Thank you.